All right, Parshas Kisisa. So even before the Egel is discussed in the Parsha, there's a lot of Zachin that we have to know. So the Parsha starts with Dabra Hashem Moshe Lemar. Hashem spoke to Moshe saying, Kisisa says Reish Bnei Yisrael. So what's the lashon of Sisa? It means to lift up the heads of Bnei Yisrael. Lufkudehem. The Targum titles of Kudehem to Leminyonehain, to their numbers. So how do we translate this pasuk? It's a little bit difficult, but when you count, when you lift up Bnei Yisrael for their numbers, each person will give he'll give something instead of his nefesh, Lashem, to Hashem b'fkaydesam when you're counting them, and there won't be a negef, a magefa, when you count them. All right? Zok Rashi. So already in the first pasuk, it's jam-packed. So Kisisa Zok Rashi, lashon Kabbalah. It's a lashon of Kabbalah, which is a lashon of accepting. Okay? So it's very interesting, because Lamais, on the one hand, the Torah never told us anywhere before that we're not allowed to count Klal Yisrael. The Torah never gave us any mitzvah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu never told us any mitzvah to count, to not count, to how to count, what to do. But it just says like this: Ki sisa, when you're gonna. It doesn't mean when you're gonna. It means go and do it. Right? I mean, I don't know that this is one of the places where the Chazal tied ki in this way, but it has to be that way. So Zok Rashi Losha Kabbalah Ketargumai, like the Areta Kabel Yoschush Bam Bnei Yisrael. The Targum says when you'll be Mekabel the Cheshben, the counting and the amount of Bnei Yisrael Leminyan Nehain. Right? So that's what Kisisa means. When you'll count. When you'll accept the countings, the things that you'll use to count Bnei Yisrael. Ladas Kamahem. Lekabel Sikum Minyonim Ladas Kamahem. When you'll be finished accepting all the, because you can't count people. Each person has to give something, right? What are the somethings? So that's why we're going to say that each person should give. Kaloiver Labkudim gives a machzah shekel, and you count as the machzah shekels. It was a token to know how to count how many people there were. Ladas kamahem, to know how many there were. Al timnim lagul goyles. Don't count the heads. Eliyidnu kol echad machzah shekel. Each person will give a half a shekel. V'timnas hashkolim v'tedim. You'll count up the shkolim and you'll know the amounts. V'layiyah behem negev. Shehaminyan sheilut ba'ayin hara v'hadever ba'aleim k'moishem netzinu b'mei David. This is a parsha in Shmuel Beis that David HaMelech counted the Klal Yisrael, and there was a magefa, and many people died. Right? So la'yiyah behem negev v'fkaydesam. So there won't be a magefa when you'll count them, because the minyan is sheilut, ayin hara is sheilut on a davar shebeminyan. If you want to, you want to be inconspicuous of ayin haras and you don't count. Right? So really what's interesting is because the Isser to count Klal Yisrael, the Isser to count Yidden, like when we're counting for a minyan, right? We don't count 1, 2. Either we do Hashiyas HaMecha or we do Hametz Lechem and Haaretz, right? All the Fashidna ways of counting, right? But the point is that whether there is going to be Ayin Hara, whether there's not going to be Ayin Hara, whether there's is going to be a Magefa, whether there's not going to be a Magefa, we are warned in the Torah over here. This is the Makar. For not counting Klal Yisrael, Shehaminyan Sheilut ba'ayin hara. What's the pshat that by when you have a davar shebeminyan, when you have something that's counted, the ayin hara sheilut on it, right? So I can get into the whole Torah of what ayin hara is about. We spoke about ayin hara before. Maybe we can mention this, but I don't remember what we said. But I'll go upon him. The concept of Klal Yisrael is that we're really neshamas, and we're really not finite. And now we're going, and we're creating a finite number. That's 1, that's 2, that's 3. You're making numbers. You're making the infinite finite. So that's a problem. When something's infinite, the Kayach Yisrael can't be shaylat on them. But now, when you're making them being able to be finite, so then that could cause problems, right? It's not because of Ayin Hara, right? The Torah says you're not allowed to do it because Hashem says you're not allowed to do it. Now you want to say that maybe the reason why Hashem said it is because after you have shenish, but that's the point.
So when you count it as a whole, then the rod's able to get you back more?
In a certain eifin, yeah. How exactly that works, I'm not sure. I mean, there's a lot of fascinating Torah and Ayin Hara. You know, it's part of the Torah. You know, people are like, oh, I don't believe in Ayin Hara. You know, you don't have to believe in Ayin Hara. But how are you going to answer all the Gemaras that talk about it? How are you going to answer all the other Chazals that talk about it? You know, in there's Chazals you have to work through. You know, I'm not saying that you should or shouldn't go to the Ayin Hara lady. You know, people have betachin Hashem and they're not busy with these types of things. You know, my grandfather told me a Maisa. He said that there's a bavusta fellow. It sounds like he was some kind of askin. And, you know, like, it was mashma from the way my grandfather was saying the story that this guy's picture was in the paper was in the paper every week, probably more than once. And, probably featured more than once in the paper every week. And he came to my grandfather, all kinds of Shrekel Chatzaros. And no one knew about it because, he still looked good in the paper. And my grandfather told him, if you stop being so popular in the newspaper, you'll see that all your stuff will get better. V'kachava. One of the basic mahalachim in understanding Ayin Hara is that it causes kina. And, kina causes people to get upset. And when you have, like, all the eyes glaring at you, even if it's only something in the nefesh of a person, but it can cause real damage. And it's nicht a good zach. So you have to stay away from that.
That's a lot of rabbanim try to stay away from covet.
And it's time you're supposed to try away from covet. And covet's a good zach, Ask your grandfather, when he got up by the dinner over there in Lado. So then what happens? So it's interesting. Rashi says Dever ba'aleim, and Dever they get Dever. David. Why? What was the story Bimei David? So the Sifsei Chachamim says Shamana oisam b'loy chatzoi shkalim. He counted them without using tokens, without using half shkalim. Shemipnei sharosh hakasav bo v'lakach es kes v'kipur me'es b'nei Yisrael v'nesatzei Yisrael v'nei Yisrael moed she'em adanu chosh l'hesek zera azayis eluf isha bavor adanim. So it's very interesting. When David HaMelech counted Klal Yisrael, his cheshbon was that there's Gemara Yuma that's marich in this, which Mitzvah Hashem. But David HaMelech thought, this is what the Sisei Chachamim is saying, David HaMelech thought that this was only a Gzeira Lefi Shah, that this was a Gzeira for right now, don't count them, right? Because the money was going specifically, why do we need Shkalim? Not so much for the counting, but for the Adonim that you needed for the Mishkan. Right, that they needed it for the to raise funds for the Mishkan. So he didn't think that there was any issue with counting because it was only for the Adonim. Not that the Torah has any kpeda on not counting the people. Meaning, stam, if you'll do the Ratan Hashem, then there won't be any negav. Meaning, Hashem says give money to the Adonim, right? And now, there won't be a negav because you're doing Ratan Hashem. That's what the Sisei Chacham is understanding what David HaMelech's cheshbon was. Al derech with tzedakah tatzim limaves. Right? All tzedakah, any donation that you give to a good, valuable, I don't want to say Jewish, but a Torah or Tefillah or a real chesed cause, right, is tatzim limaves. Right? So then this money was going to the Adonim. They were soliciting funds to support the Mishkan, and literally to support it physically, because that's how they were holding up the Krashim, right? And the Adonim were the silver bases where the Krashim sat on, right? And maybe they used some of it for Karbanis, right? They needed, the Mishkan was, they were doing, the statuses were going out of control in those days too, and they needed money for the Karbanis, you know what I mean? Right? You think when Moshe Rabbeinu said V'yichuli Truma of what was going on the statuses, I mean, But
a lot of charity funds.
Yeah, no, all the cause match and the chesed funds with dollars, everything was going over there. But I'm just saying, you see how much you could be piled with these things. Think about it. How many thousands, hundreds, thousands, millions of dollars are going to stock and chesed for all these things? It's unbelievable. So Zakte Sifsei Chachamim weiter that upirish b'fkaidaisam im chatzai hashkal meishahim yu lahem lemeskeres v'nesham chalei shavei negav ba'olam. That's a very interesting thing. He says when you're counting them. Right? What does it mean? It sounds like there's more than just taking a token from everybody just to be able to have a number. To not, to do the census, how many Jews there are. Right? And it looks like it's a little bit more than to just give a donation towards the Adonim. So what was going on over here? So he says like this. What does it mean b'fkaidaisam? B'fkaidaisam means when we're counting them, right? It'll always be l'zikaron l'fnei Hashem when people gave them money, whenever some Hakadosh Baruch Hu would want to punish some, maybe the Yidden, or bring something bad into the world, so the Adanim are going to remind Hakadosh Baruch Hu, it's going to be a Mazkeres L'fnei Hashem, that they gave tzedakah, so it'll prevent Hakadosh Baruch Hu from giving the thing. It's interesting because you have Zahav and you have Kesef, right? There's a lot of talk about this. I believe there's a Marsha in Bava Basra that talks about this also when talking about the Aron, right? The Gemara says that the Gemara says like this. We have the Egel in the sixth parsha, right? So the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, when he would go L'fnai L'fnim, he wouldn't wear the big day Zahav. Why? Because then Katega Nas is a Neger, right? Because he's coming to be Mechaper, so he had to be Mechaper and go in the big day Zahav. The Aron itself was Zahav. How do you help that, right? The Aron was also Chelik of the Kapara of all the time, right? So when you have Kesef and you have Zahav, right? Zahav represents Din. It's more of a darker color. Kesef is like, it's silver. It's more white. White represents more Chesed. Kesef is Lashon Kisufim, wanting to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's what Kesef is, right? So the Adanim were made out of Kesef, right? It's very interesting. Even if the Yerias of the Mishkan were covering over the entire Mishkan, you're still able to see the Adanim on the bottom. You're still able to see that even when people are Shvachim Isis on the bottom, you're able to see the Kisufim and the Gaguim and the Cheshik and the Ratan that they have for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? And that's what's happening now. And that's why you only give a half a shekel. The famous Maisa. I'm trying to remember exactly how it goes. Why was it? I think the Maisa goes that the Chedusha Harim, who was the Ger Rebbe, was Talmud of the Kotzker, right? So, all the Ger Rebbes that we talk about all the time, the Sfas Emes, Imre Emes, right? So he was the Zayda, the Chedusha Harim was the Zayda of the Sfas Emes. So the Chedusha Harim had, I think, 12 or 13 children that died B'chayav. He had one son that survived. He was like 40-something years old. And he was the father of the Sfas Emes. Sfas Emes was nifter in 1905. Right, and then the Imre Emes took him over. It was Rebbe till 1948. He lived his last few years. He survived the war. He was already very, very old man, and they managed to smuggle him out during the World War II to Eretz Yisrael. He was nifter in 48, and then was basically Yisrael, v'chulum. So the Chedusha him met with Israel Hildesheimer. Israel Hildesheimer, we can't get carried away with all the history over here, but he was a Rosh Hashiva and a Rav in Germany. Now the contrast between a Polish Chassidish Rebbe and a German Rosh Hashiva of a yeshiva college, with the term Dar Cheretz, right? So he asked the Chedusha Harim, what's pshat that he give half a shekel, right? So we know, Chazal state that HaKadosh Baruch Hu showed Moshe Rabbeinu the shekel of Eish, right? He showed, Moshe Rabbeinu was Neskasha, how the Machzah shekel should look. So he showed him a shekel of Eish, Yordim and Hashemayim, and he showed him, right? They state in Medrash, right? So he says, I think that, I'm not sure if I remember the whole Maisa, but the vote was, he told him that, he only had a Machzas HaShekel, because, whatever you're going to do in Avodas Hashem is going to be Machzas on the other half. And the Chedusha was ganz stark Mishabech, was very, very stark Mishabech, this word. Because, what's a Chatzi Shekel? However much I'm going to do, I'm batzim limited, right? So that's weiter why it's shaykh to the Indian of, that's why it's Kesef, and that's why it's, the Adonim were made out of Kesef, because Adonim represent this thing also, right? It's interesting, the Shemi Shmuel in Parshas Truma says a Gevaldige Vart. He says mamish a short thing. So the Shemi Shmuel was how he shaykh to the Chedusha, he quotes the Chedusha all over the place. The Shemi Shmuel's father was the Avnei Nezer, who was a Talmud and a son-in-law of the Kotzker. So Avnei Nezer and the Chedusha were both Talmidim of the Kotzker, so they were very close. Unfortunately, there's not that much left of Sachat Shabbos Manazeh. The Shemi Shmuel's son, Reb David, was killed in the war. He did have a few. I believe Reb David had a brother who survived and moved to Tel Aviv. And there are descendants of Avnei Nezer around. Very few. We have from the Shemi Shmuel is very interesting. We have from the Shemi Shmuel his Torah on Chumash. From the Avnei Nezer himself never printed his Svarim on Chumash. He wrote his Chuvas and the Eglei Tal. And the Goinus in there is Ma'abel Arayan. It's the Chuvas and the Eglei Tal. And he quotes throughout the Svarim, throughout the Chuvas, he quotes his son. And the Avnei Nezer used to talk B'mishaber, his son's God's Torah greatly. And we don't have any of his Torah and Nigla Kamat nothing. it was all destroyed, it was all lost. But we have his Torah on the parsha, so he brings up the Atzei Shittim, right? The Mishkan was made of Atzei Shittim. So what's pshat? So the Medrash says a fascinating thing. The Medrash says that the only reason why HaKadosh Baruch Hu created Atzei Shittim was for the Mishkan, right? So the Medrash says the same thing about Zahav, right? That Zahav is really a very, very special thing and really shouldn't have been something that everybody would be able to use, right? But because it was being used for the Beis HaMikdash, so for the Mishkan, for the Beis HaMikdash, so that's why Zahav was created. And the Medrash says the same, come out the same nusach about the Atzei HaRozim, the cedar trees that was used for the cedar trees that were used for the Beis HaMikdash, for the Mishkan. So for Hashem Yishmo, I don't understand. What's the Gereisa Chashivos of Atzei Shittim? It's wood. Wood is wood. It's not. You have a pound of wood, you have a pound of gold. Nobody's going to go for the wood over the gold. What's the Medrash saying? What's the Mila? See, he brings a Gemara that says that La'olam, a person shouldn't be kasha ke'eres. And he says that's the midah that we're talking about over here. We're not talking about that we're not talking about the etam of the Atzei HaRozim, but it's the midah of standing strong and tall and proud like the eres tree does, like the cedar tree does. See, he says, he brings a Medrash weiter, and he says that by the Mishkan, he says, we know the Beis HaMikdash got destroyed, right? But the Mishkan, what you create, what you're going to build, it's going to be oimed la'olam ula'olam. See, he says, no, it's not the pshat that the Mishkan will physically be standing, but it's the Yid needs to use this midah to constantly pick himself up, and he mamish says this. It's in one paragraph, but he says with the ganze knack that a Yid may feel that he's very, very low, and a Yid may feel that I can't be kasha ke'eres. Who am I in my avodas Hashem? What good am I? No, you're going to give a machtas hashekel, because only half. HaKadosh Baruch Hu will be mashlim whatever else that you'll be able to do. They say that if a person, we spoke many times about Chedushei Torah and the Torah that a person can create in this world, could create in this world, and it creates other olamas. Rishtin Chazal, that pasuk in Yeshaya says, "Ki kasher shemayim hachadashim v'aretz hachadasha, kein yamed zarachem v'shimchem," or maybe Yishimcha's Rachem, I don't remember exactly the Nusach HaPasuk. Anyways, there was a story that Rav Gifter, Seif Yama, was forgetting his learning, and he was very, very tzebrachim. He said, I'm going to come up to Shemayim, and they're going to start forherring me, I'm not going to know nothing. So one of his Talmidim told him that Shtein Chazal, when a person comes up to Shemayim, they're going to remind him of all the Torah that he learned B'chayav. Right? So as much as you may think that you forgot all your Torah, you may think that you forget all this, you may feel you're unworthy, you may feel like this, you may feel we all have shvach days, right? But the point is that we're giving a machtas. It's not our job to perfect everything. It's not our job we got to do our avodah, but we got to do our avodah with 150% shleimus. It's not excusable to be chaplap, right? But as I state, so that's why I think that's dafka why it's was looked in the Adonim, because the Adonim were on the bottom, they were the silver. When we hit rock bottom, that's when we have the greatest cheshek to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's what the Machtas HaShekel was about. It was Davka Machtas, because Machtas means between me and you, we have a shleimus. Between me and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I have a shleimus. Rav Nachman says, I spoke a few years ago in Mesivta by Shalosh Shudis, it's Parsha Shkolim. I said over this bar, Rabbi Yisachar said this over when I was in 10th grade. Figured I had to pay back from Mesivta. I said it for Rabbi Yisachar. Rabbi Yisachar said, what's pshat? That every davar chashav is on the right side, your heart's on the left side. Shamot Maisa. I'll tell you something funny, and I even spoke to Rabbi Anderson about this. This was great. I assumed the Eretz Tzvi in the Chuvas. The Eretz Tzvi is the Kozhik lover. He's the Talmud of the Sachat. Yes, if you read the book about the Eretz Tzvi, he talks all about this is what I was telling you about the Shem Mishmor before. Talks about in the book about the Kozhik lover. Rabbi Eretz Tzvi from it. He was a goyin adid. Briskerov said that every minig and every zachin, he says, I looked in at Tosis. He brought Makaris. It's very interesting in his Sefer on Chumash. He brings a lot of, like he's miyashav, a lot of the interesting chassidishim and hagim. Al pi Chazal, al pi Vashteit, al pi Rashi Tosfos, like from regular, what even what non-chassidim would have to be masked to. It's very, very fascinating. See, he has a shaila about what to do, right? Because where do you wear the tefillin shel yad, right?
Left hand. Or if you're ready,
but it should be kineged alev, right? But what if the person's, so if you're a righty, right, so you put the tefillin on the left hand, that's connected to the leg. Right? What if the leg is on the wrong side? Does it make an afgamina for the tefillin? So I told her, your mom was laughing like you thought it was funny. I didn't make this up. It's there in the same for you. You can look at it, But Zakt Reb Nachman, Reb Shachar said this over. The pshat is because your heart is on my right side. You have to reach a kamaycha. The pshat is that when I'm standing keneged you, kamayim alpanim ken leiv adam al adam. That's the avoid of Machzah Shekel, that's the avoid of tzedakah. The avoid of tzedakah is, the same as Sheikh Chazal, right? What's the mitzvah of tzedakah? The mitzvah of, how does Hashem make the world? Hashem makes a rich person so he should give money to the poor person? Or Hashem makes him poor to give the rich person the schus to be able to give money to the poor person? Which way does it go, right? All the shmuzin about tzedakah all revolve around the parish of Machzah Shekel, of tzedakah, all revolve around Machzah Shekel. And that's why David HaMelech was saying that he thought that it was a regular case of tzedakah tatzim l'mavis, because you're just giving the money towards the adonim. Right? There's an emek into why he thought that. He wasn't just coming from Stam the altar. Oh, yeah, let's give to the adonim. Oh, let's give it for the herring for the kiddush. No, we're giving to build the Mishkan. We're giving to build the foundation of the Mishkan. Right? It wasn't, the Mishkan was a building that stood on the ground, but the foundation that was holding up the Krushim was the Adonim, was made out of Kesef, was the Lashon of Kisufim to hold up the Atzei Arazim of Kashim Ke'eres, like we were talking before. And that's the pshat in this whole Zach over here. So, that Tishlei Bem Negef if Kerdei Sam. V'lo yadu shezeis hagzer hi af l'deiris, ela shebeminyan hazeh yichu chatzai ashkom v'yasim ne'em Adonim liyis l'bnei Yisrael zikarnu l'deiris liknas b'em karbonis tzibur l'shar tzorchei tzibur. And the Sisei Chacham goes weiter to say that what it means b'fkaydei with the half shekels, that it should be zikarn l'fnei Hashem, and they didn't realize that this gzera, with David HaMelech b'shaitai, didn't realize that this mitzvah, this gzera, was also l'deiris. Elo shebeminyan hazeh yichu chatzai ashkalim. When they were counting this census of Klal Yisrael, they should take half shkalim, and they should make the adonim liyos l'bnei Yisrael zikarn l'deiris liknas b'em karbonis tzibur l'shar tzorchei tzibur. They needed this always for all the years to be able to have the funds to bring the karbonis tzibur, and for all the other tzorchei tzibur came through these half shekel donations. Right? We're not asking for a lot; we're asking just for a half a shekel. Right? But again, the nakud of half is because it's not your chiyuv. It's not your job to finish everything, but between you and the other person, you have everything, right? And there's some other vort that v'nosnu, you can read it backwards and forwards, because between this way and that way, I give you, you give me, we're one happy family, right? Okay, fine. And I think that there's a shtukal emek over here also, that this takinin of tzedakah tatzim and mavis. What are we talking about? V'nosnu is koyfer nefesh. What do we mean koyfer nefesh? Like my nefesh is totally in this money, right? But kefi ha'am, or kefi what we're saying, that lo yibhem negav, that this taka is something stark, right? So the half a shekel is what's protecting you. The fact that I'm not going to think that I'm a whole being myself, right? And that it's only between me and you that we can create the shleimus. So then that's what's going to protect us, and that's why we don't count, because we're not the shleimim that we think we are. So we can't make a whole cheshbon over here. Right, and that's the, yep. There's a vort that the Gemara says in Bava Basra and Yud in the Sugi of Tzedakah Grada, that Moshe Rabbeinu asked HaKadosh Baruch Hu, "B'ma Torem Karnim Shel Yisrael?" How can I lift up the spirit, so to speak, of Klal Yisrael? So he says V'kisisa. So the Chidah, I'm not sure now if it's in Pesach Einayim or Maris Ayin. One of the Chidah Svarim Al Hashas. They rather just reprinted it beautifully. I didn't see the inside, I saw the cover. I think it's whichever one of the machines that's printing all the Chidah Svarim now.
By its cover.
By its cover, yeah. So the Chidah says that Sisa as Reish B'nai Yisrael, the Rosh Tevis, Taf, Aleph, Reish, Beis, and Yud is Gematria Taryag, because Tzedakah is Keneged Kol HaMitzvos, right? But the Gemara says like this, it's one thing if you give a person $1, you can get something to eat, or you're giving a person supper, and he's good for the night. You give a person food for next week. You put someone on his own 2 feet, that's the biggest tzedakah that you could do. Karen Yisrael is through Kisisa, but I think there's an emek here. What can we as Klal Yisrael do to lift each other up is by making sure that we see our other half. We see the other yid that needs our help, and we should go out of our way to help him, right? And that's v'loyi behem negef if kaidesam. The Eibshter soll helfen taka that b'schus the tzedakah and b'schus all the charity campaigns that we're doing, befrat for B'nai Shalom right now. We'll be zeicha to all kinds of getzachen, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu should taka be matzalas from all the tzedakah should be matzalas from kol davar dvar maram, and all the imdim aleinu l'chaliseinu with the mitzvah tzedakah should protect us and be oimed l'chuseinu, and we should be zeicha to the geula krayv v'meher v'meinu amen.